All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our RBT practice question series, where we're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. At a coffee shop, a customer notices that pressing the button for cream dispenses the desired amount. They begin pressing the button consistently every time they need cream. What type of contingency is maintaining the customer's behavior of pressing the cream button? Pretty straightforward question. It's just a consequence question, but asked a little differently because the question is asking you what type of contingency is maintaining the behavior. And when we think about a contingency, you want to think about that if then statement because a contingency is just how we're going to get to our consequence. In this case, the customer does what? They press the button and then they receive cream. So the contingency is if you press button, you will get cream. And so when they keep pressing that button anytime they need cream in their coffee, why are they doing that? Well, think about the consequence. The consequence is they're getting the cream added to their coffee. So something is being added and it's increasing their behavior, which is going to make this a positive reinforcement. So a contingency is just a consequence contingency, more or less. If you do something, then you get something else. Think about it how we use it when we are working with clients. If I tell a client, if you do your homework, then you get a break. If you do 15 minutes of work, then you get a break. I'm setting up a contingency where we can give positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement for a desired behavior. That's the same thing that's happening here. The customer pushes the button, they get their cream, they continue pushing the button because of positive reinforcement. Negative reinforcement, well, since the consequence is an addition, it isn't negative. C, positive punishment, the behavior increased, or in this case is maintaining, so it's not going to be punishment, and it's not going to be extinction, because punishment and extinction only decrease behavior. If the behavior is not decreasing, it can't be punishment or extinction. So what type of contingency is maintaining the customer's behavior? It's going to be A, positive reinforcement. You're preparing for a session with the client who's learning to identify shapes. For the session, you gather a variety of shape flashcards, review the skill acquisition plan, and confirm the target behaviors with your supervisor. Which of the following steps is essential when preparing for the session? One of our task list items talks about preparing for session. And when we're preparing for session, we mean beforehand. You want to be ready for session when you arrive. You're only going to get a small amount of time with your client, and every minute is valuable. So all the preparation should come prior to session. So in this case, you have a client, they're going to identify shapes, you get flashcards ready, you review the plan, you confirm your target behaviors. All that's great. Now, they also want to know what else is essential when preparing for this session. A, asking the parents if there is anything they would like to change and then making those changes immediately. That's not going to be your role to change the plan or the treatment, right? You can discuss with the parents about how things are going and then pass that along to your supervisor, but it's not your role as the technician to actually change anything in the moment without approval. B, reviewing the skill acquisition plan to ensure correct implementation of procedures. Absolutely. Even if you've been doing the same plan for a long time, it never hurts to review it. You just make sure you still got the right target behaviors, the right reinforcement, and just to make sure you're doing everything correctly. So when preparing for session, you do want to review the plan to make sure all the procedures are in place. C, waiting until you arrive at your session to review session notes from previous sessions. If you work on a team of technicians, you want to review their notes, but you want to do it before session. You don't want to wait until you arrive to review these notes. That's too late. You've got to do it before so you can show up and ready to implement and work with the client. D, letting the client decide what you will be and won't be working on that day. Should we involve the client in decision making? Absolutely. It is their treatment. It is their life that we are working 4. So they have to be involved, but letting them decide every session every day, of course, is not going to be essential to preparing for your session. In this case, B, reviewing the skill acquisition plan to ensure correct implementation of procedures is essential when preparing for that session. During a client's break, a technician observes a child moving between various toys, including a puzzle, a dollhouse, and a set of blocks. The technician times how long the child engages with each item, but does not interfere with the child's choices. What type of assessment does this most resemble? So we've got an assessment question, and it's a little vague, but there's something very specific we're going to think about when deciding what assessment is taking place. We know we have a client on a break, and the technician is watching the child as they engage in different toys and blocks and things like that. When the technician is making their observations, they're also timing the level of engagement with each item. Importantly, though, they're not interfering with the child's choices. And so that's a big separation for this assessment. It appears to be a preference assessment, but the fact that they're not interfering with the child's choices tells us what? Well, it tells us, one, it's not a paired stimulus preference assessment or a forced choice. With the paired stimulus or a forced choice, that the choices are very contrived, right? There is interference with the choices because you're only giving a limited number of choices. Same with B, a multiple stimulus preference assessment. Even if we have items A, B, C, and D, there's only a certain amount of items that can be chosen. And once that item is chosen, it's going to either be removed or put back and replaced with other items. So we are interfering with the choices there. With C, a free operant preference assessment, this is what we would consider more or less child-led. You're letting the client lead, you're letting the child lead, you're just observing. You're not really interfering with anything. And that's what this technician is doing here. They're conducting a free operant preference assessment where they're just measuring what the child is engaging with without giving much guidance. And then D, a reinforcer assessment. Remember the difference between a preference assessment and a reinforcer assessment. Preference assessment, we're just trying to determine what the client does and doesn't like and potential reinforcers. With a reinforcer assessment, we've got to actually manipulate things and look at behavior change. That's not what is occurring here, not a reinforcer assessment. What is happening is this technician is letting the child lead, and that's going to be considered a free operant preference assessment. A behavior technician is monitoring how often a client initiates social greetings throughout the day. At the end of the session, the technician takes the data from their data sheet and transfer it to an online graph to track progress over time. Why is it important to graph data regularly? Now, on our study guide, or our task list, I should say, there is a section about graphing data. And for most of you now, you're probably going to use some sort of automated application where you put the data in and it graphs for you, which is great. But some of you may not. Some of you still may take data by hand or have to transfer data over manually. And in that case, it's very important because it's going to generate our graphs. So if we have a technician who's monitoring social greetings throughout the day, and then they take that data and transfer it to an online graph, why is that important? Why do we have such an emphasis on graphing in ABA? Well, in ABA, visual analysis is our primary way of analyzing outcomes. So that graph allows us to visually analyze progress. If I have a graph that looks like this, I can pretty quickly see an upward trend. If I have a graph that looks like this, I can see a downward trend, and something like this, pretty flat. You can look at those graphs very quickly and understand what is going on. So A, graphs allow stakeholders to visualize data in progress. You can give somebody a graph that looks like this, and they can quickly look at it and get a good idea of what's happening. And that's why it's very important for parents and other stakeholders to be able to see these graphs and why we want to do it regularly. B, updated graphs are needed to make up-to-date decisions about current interventions. Yes, your supervisor is going to use those graphs to start to make conclusions or assumptions about the interventions. And then from that data and those assumptions, they're going to start to make potentially decisions and changes about the interventions going on. So A and B both look good. C, Graphing is only once a month. That's not true. We have to graph regularly. We don't graph just once a month. So why should we graph regularly? Well, it's going to allow stakeholders to visualize data in progress, and then it's going to help supervisors and even you make up-to-date decisions about current interventions. So our answer here is both A and B. A skill acquisition plan is developed in order to teach a client to independently tie their shoes. The plan includes a target skill, specific teaching procedures, reinforcement strategies, and mastery criteria. What else is necessary to include in this skill acquisition plan? There are some essential items we want in a skill acquisition plan. We obviously want a target. We want a goal. We want how we're going to teach it, maybe reinforcement strategies, and then mastery criteria. Now, in this case, if this is all involved to teach a client to tie their shoes, what else do we need? A detailed explanation of the client's daily schedule. That is not necessary, right? Maybe that's relevant for some things, but it's definitely not necessary to understand the client's full daily schedule in a skill acquisition plan. We're thinking about what is necessary. B, a clearly defined description of the target behavior. Yeah, you need an operational definition, right? You've got to have a description. You've got to have a definition. That is necessary. Without a definition of the behavior, how are we going to observe and measure that behavior reliably? C, a summary of the client's preferred reinforcement history. We're not going to need a full summary. It's not necessary. We do want to know what reinforcement we'll be using, but a full summary of their history is not necessary in this skill acquisition plan. That's more of a general treatment plan thing. And then D, a list of unrelated skills observed during previous sessions. When we talk about a skill acquisition plan, we're being very specific to that skill, which is tie shoes. Treatment plans are kind of the broad umbrella. Then you'd have like behavior plans and skill acquisition plans, which are much more specific. So what is necessary for this specific skill acquisition plan would be a clearly defined description of that target behavior. We always want to define our behavior so we can observe and measure it reliably. Thanks for watching. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.